It was on a rainy day that we left our pueblo on our way to El Norte, how they would say it, in search for the American dream and to be reunited with my father, my siblings, and I, along with my mother. That day would be the last time we would see our grandparents. For myself, it was 21 years later that I was able to see 3 of my grandparents. For my mom, it's been over 25 years that she hasn't seen her parents or siblings. My dad, on the other hand, never got the chance to see his parents again. My grandmother passed away in 2004, and my grandpa passed away just a little over a year ago. As for my brothers, they never got to see my grandparents on my dad's side, and to this day have not seen my grandparents on my mom's side, who still live today. We never got the chance to see what it was like to grow up with grandparents. I remember getting on the airplane for the first time in my life, a 6-year-old kid from a small pueblo heading to Tijuana, where we would cross our way into San Diego. When we arrived to Tijuana, we stayed at a downtown TJ hotel, or Zona Centro, how they call it here, until we finally got notified 4 days later that it was time to go. My mother, brothers, and I started to walk until we reached a terrain area near Plaza de Tijuana. As sunset approached, we continued to walk following the instructions of the coyote. My older brother and I took turns in carrying our 2-year-old older brother. My other 4-year-old brother was old enough to walk. We kept walking until we finally reached a part of the mountain where we would sleep just a few hours before heading on our trail again. Before dawn, we were woken up by the coyote that it was time to go. I remember crossing the road and coming into some large fields that seemed like some cornfields. By this time, it was early morning where a helicopter started hovering over the fields. We were told not to move until the helicopter left. About 30 minutes later, we approached a house where they took us in, showered us, and waited until that evening that day to take us with my dad. Just before sunset, a white cart arrived to come and get us and take us there. When we arrived, I was nervous with anticipation as the door opened to go inside the house. Finally, I saw my dad for the first time in about 8 months. I got this weird feeling of shyness. This is how our American dream began. Shortly thereafter, my dad didn't wait long to get us enrolled into school. We had already missed about 3 months of the school year, but my older brother and I catched up pretty quick. We were like sponges, excited about our future in America. I remember our first day of school, we were so confused because we didn't understand what the teacher and kids were saying. But it didn't take long before my older brother and I learned to understand and communicate with our teacher and classmates. I had a super fun childhood, or normal childhood. Going to school, coming home, and going outside to play with my friends. My best friend was Asian, Cambodian background, born in the US to be exact. I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, a melting pot of cultures. Our neighborhood was composed of Mexicans, Guatemalans, Cambodians, Vietnamese, Somalians, Israelis, Ethiopians, Sudanese, and many more. I have awesome memories of having tons of fun, from playing cops and robbers, hide and go seek, kick the can, soccer, football, basketball, baseball, riding our bikes, rollerblading, and much more. One day, one of my dad's friends, a mechanic, went to the house to fix one of his cars. After he was done fixing the car, I asked my dad to ask his friend if I could go to work for him. He looked at me a little bit weird and said that I was too young, but mainly he was referring to my height. I was really short. Right next to me was my older brother, and he said, "You're too young, but he can come and work," referring to my older brother, and the rest is history. He would go on to become a professional auto technician. It would take me another year for me to go to work as a mechanic. Shortly thereafter, I bought my first car for $200, a 1983 Honda Accord hatchback 5-speed manual. My older brother and I were really interested in getting our driver's license, so we took the driver's ed class. After the class was over, we were given instructions that we would need our social security cards to be able to fill out the application required by the DMV. My brother and I looked at each other and were a bit confused. We didn't know what the instructor was talking about. We got home and asked my dad if we had social security cards. With a disappointment on his face, he told us that we didn't. Our dreams of getting our driver's license went down the drain, while most of our friends were ready to get it themselves. That didn't stop us from driving though. It was not until my senior year in high school where the burdensome of not being a documented citizen started to really affect me. All the college applications asked for a social security. All the scholarships applications did as well. The hopes to continue studying started to fade little by little. Before I graduated high school in 2003, the Iraq War began, and I was ready to enlist in the military. To be exact, I wanted to join the Marines. I wanted to serve my country. I told a friend of mine that we should go get enrolled. So we went to the nearest Army recruiting location. The recruiting officer began filling out the application, and I was really excited about going to Iraq and serving my country. The officer filling out the application then asked me for my I-94. With disappointment in my face, I told him that I didn't have one. He was bummed out because he said that I really needed that in order to enroll. So I graduated high school with a 3.5 GPA, and since I wasn't able to apply to a 4-year university, I decided to go to a community college. So I was in college in Chula Vista, California. To my fortune, at the time, Governor Greg Davis had signed a piece of legislation, AB 540, where it said that although I didn't have permanent legal immigration status, I could attend college and be charged as a resident. That was great news for a lot of us that didn't have the legal immigration status to continue our education. We could not apply for financial aid or any type of in-state financial help. So paying for school became tough when it was also hard for me to find jobs under the table to sustain myself and my education. It seemed like reaching a dead end. Driving became so paranoid for me. Since I didn't have a valid driver's license, I couldn't get car insurance, so I would drive around without a license or insurance. I would drive as precautious as I could, avoiding being stopped by cops. Every time I would see a cop, it didn't even matter if the cop wasn't behind me. My heart would start racing 1,000 miles per hour, and the adrenaline would start kicking in. Let alone when a police vehicle got behind me, I always assumed getting pulled over was a for sure thing. I started driving when I was 14 years old. I needed to get from school to work, church, and so on. I recall correctly the first time I was pulled over. It was on Sunday, October 29th, like around noon time of the year 2000. When I got pulled over, the first thing the police officer asked me was to see my driver's license and proof of insurance. I obviously told the officer that I didn't have one. He then said, why hadn't I gone to go get my driver's license since I was old enough to go get it? I told him that I couldn't get one. He said, is it because you don't have a social security? I replied to the officer, that is correct, sir. The police officer proceeded to write me a ticket for no license and no insurance. On top of that, proceeded to tow my car away to the impound. And that's how my relationship of fear with cops began. This would be the first of many times I would get pulled over. By the way, I asked the officer why he pulled me over. He said that I looked suspicious because I was wearing a hat. In 2009, I decided I would no longer drive. The fear of driving without a license had reached its limit. By this time, I had already lost thousands of dollars in cars being confiscated by the police that I couldn't get back and traffic tickets.